Hello, travel pros. Welcome back to the podcast, the Strategic Travel Entrepreneur Podcast. Rita here. I am your hostess with the mostest. I hope you're having a wonderful Friday. We are in episode 2 of our content creation series. And last week we talked a little bit about the blueprints, kind of thinking about those foundational parts of the content creation blueprint and like what types of content that you should be making to make things a little bit more sustainable. Today's episode, we're going to get a little bit more tactical when we talk about like creating high impact content without the overwhelm, because that's the most important part of me. I will consistently say, like, if it's not going to be simple or easy, I am not going to do it. So, that is kind of like the foundation of just about everything that I do, is that it has to be simple and it has to be something that I'm going to have absolutely fun with, or it will not get done. Before we get into that, got some very important announcements for you. Pre-happy St. Paddy's Day, because I know that's coming up around the corner. So I hope you are all being as responsible as possible. Also, hello to anybody that is at the Asta River Cruise Expo. I am actually heading out to help with another fam on the Danube River. I will be at TMP on the river, so I will see you all this weekend. I cannot wait. I do have a couple of friends that will be on that one, so I cannot wait to see you there. Also wanted to let you know, you probably heard about this last week. Summer Camp at Sea registration is slowly but quickly wrapping up for Summer Camp at Sea. I say that because the cruise line is selling out cabins. And so I want to make sure that you have your cabin on there. So, head on over to summercampatsea.com or the link down below in the show description to reserve your cabin. I know many of you have already told me timing is not in the cards for you. But you want to know details for next year. So I've got to start working on those. But that is probably going to be not an immediate thing that I take a look at. But soon. So if you have any suggestions or ideas for next year, let me know. But yeah, just wanted to get that out there. If you are burnt out, overwhelmed, wanting to freshen up your travel business, you've got to be there with us at summer camp this summer. So I cannot wait to do this with you all. If you joined in, I did a live session on Thursday with Lisa from Fine Travel. It was an amazing session where I talked about everything that has to do with Summer Camp at Sea. Plus, I kind of spilled the beans on a couple of little surprise and delights that I want to do. So definitely take a listen in. Similarly, I am officially launching the cruise content library in April. What does that mean for you? The cruise content library, I've had it on pre-sale for the past year. That pre-sale rate is expiring ASAP. So before April hits, you better sneak your booty in there if you want to secure the best ever pricing the cruise content library will ever be. I promise, it will never be the price that it currently is at for pre-sale. So make sure that you enroll, and also let any of your travel pro friends know that pre-sale is expiring ASAP, because I would hate that somebody doesn't hear about this before it expires and then be like lost out on the opportunity, especially if they're currently in the industry. So I know, like, I kick myself when I can't get in on these opportunities. So please share it with whoever you think might find the cruise content library of value. Unfortunately, I am a little bit behind on getting things, and Demetriosis has hit this past week, but I am still on track to be launching for April with all of the content that I currently have up on my schedule right now. So still trucking at that. Those are the biggest announcements. Now let's get into creating high impact content without the overwhelm for you, because I feel like that's probably the hardest thing. And when we think about creating high impact content, this supports your marketing strategy. So this helps to increase the visibility of your travel business, which is why we do it, so that the content that we put out there supports our travel services. So, and you know me, I'm all about that macro and micro content because I want you to be intentional, and I also want you to that the whole bit about overwhelm is because you are probably putting content out there without intention, without a strategy. You're also trying a lot of different things without doing that intentional macro content. So I want that to stop. I will also say, before we get into this, I need you to raise your right hand with me and say, I will not post supplier content to my social channels. Okay, let me hear you say that. I will not post supplier content to my social channels. Now, I will say, I'm okay if you do it. Like if you're reposting it in stories, because that goes away within 24 hours. I do not want to see supplier content on your social media feed. Period. Nothing on your social media feed should be pointing to another business. It should be pointing to your business. If you've been frustrated because people are not booking with you, this could be a reason why people are not booking with you, because you're showing them how great this supplier is and that supplier is. You're not showing them how great it is to work with you, how great your services are with them. So we've got to change that around. And that's this is a whole big thing about creating that high impact content. This is also why I'm the biggest proponent of macro content. Because macro content just makes life easier for you. You're able to repurpose it and then use it multiple times. I promise you, even myself, I feel like I've talked about summer camp at sea multiple times since December. I'm still reaching out to people who are like, oh, I've never heard of that. What is that? So if I am saying that, that is definitely what's happening on your end. Your clients are also feeling the same thing. So doing things that puts the most energy, where you don't have to keep spinning the wheel, is going to do yourself such a huge service. So we're going to break this down into 3 kind of different segments. So we're first going to talk about really creating that content that's going to capture the attention. It's going to be slightly different between the macro content and your social media content, because social media content really is more micro content to me. I'm going to share with you how I create consistent content without burning out. So I'm going to share with you a little bit on how I create my content calendar, how I take in seasonality, and then also how I automate and repurpose the heck out of the content, so I'm not creating content from square one. Also, we're going to touch on content that can actually drive some of your business growth. So we're going to get a little bit creative here, because it might not necessarily be some of the content that you're always putting out there. It can be the strangest of ways, which is also kind of the beauty of content creation. So let's get into it. What kind of content captures attention? I would be a little bit meta and ask you, what are your favorite types of content that you hear here on the Strategic Travel Entrepreneur podcast? I know that you all love those tangible, practical tips. So whenever I'm sharing part of my story with you, whenever I'm sharing how I did something, those are the episodes that you love. Also, when I'm bringing in guest experts who have to talk about something that can really move the needle in your business, you love that type of information. What you don't love is when I talk about mindset. And how do I know that? Is because of the data. I look at the statistics. So it is funny. I'll notice dips, or when I talk more about softer type of things that are not pack a punch. But that type of information is also important, because sometimes the stats and the feedback don't relate, because sometimes those mindset type of podcasts that I do are so impactful, and I get the best type of feedback from you, whereas I don't get the other type of feedback from some of the other episodes, but I see that a lot of you are tuning in on the other types. So you have to figure out what kind of works for your clientele as well. When I think about micro content, it goes down to the 3 E's, and this is not anything new. You've probably heard this before, but what are you doing to educate? What are you doing to engage? And what are you doing to entertain? Last year, I did an episode on a social media report on the social media content that is actually going to increase your shares and saves. And a lot of that has to do with these types of items, like what is shareable content? What is savable content? A lot of that savable content is that educational content that like you're just spewing out the tips and people are like, I need to save this so I can reference it in a future like time in my life. It's also that the shareable content is more that engaging and entertaining content where I'll give you some specific examples, but it's pretty much relatable content where people are like, oh gosh, I've done that before, or oh my gosh, I hate when other people do that. So those, like when you're thinking about the micro content and how you're going to break it down, think of it in those buckets, the educational, engaging, and the entertaining content. You can weave this kind of with your macro content, but I feel most of your macro content really is going to be educational because that's my podcast, my blog. When I start doing YouTube videos, it's going to be educational. Will it weave some of that the engagement and the entertainment? It sure will, because I don't want you to be bored from that other type of content. So I'm going to infuse my funness into this, and I am going to make anything that I do as engaging as possible. But those are highly more educational posts. Those really set you off as the authority in the type of travel that you do. So I actually went through my social media posts from my travel agency when I was promoting a lot of cruise ship retreats, and I was like, okay, what are some examples that I can give to you? The type of content that I'm still putting on that is a lot of ship inspections, ship tours, cabin tours. I will say if you don't have anything like that out, especially when you are on the trips that you're taking, you are doing yourself a disservice. This is actually one of the pieces of content that I will put on my social media, and I will record it for YouTube because it does great for both areas. And I say it does great, I mean for a visibility and engagement standpoint. I have not, but I'm also not incorporating like a conversion part. And I say that because I also want you to know, like, while these are great visibility points, they haven't been really great at converting into sales. So take that into note as well. But not every piece of content that you do is going to convert into a sale. It's also important that this keeps you top of mind. It helps you build authority because it can also bring you other types of opportunities to you in your business. So this educational content really has to position yourself as an expert. And especially if you're doing a cabin tour or a room tour, you are the expert because you are right there. You're able to show them where the outlets are. You're able to show them that there's a bar that they can shave their legs on, which is super important to people who shave their legs. You can show them what the viewpoint is from these cabins or the rooms. Just give them all the 411. So if you're not doing this type of content, and this is super easy to do, definitely do something like I'm exploring this destination or I'm exploring this cabin, because we all like to be a little bit nosy inside of other people's stuff. So this also helps people to be a little bit nosy on you, but also be like, oh, so and so tried this thing out. They know what they're talking about because they were actually able to live it and experience it. So other types of content can be these things called listicles. So 3 things someone should know before booking this kind of trip, booking this type of cruise. That was the other thing that I saw had a lot of traction on my agency social media, is when I would give ideas to business coaches on the types of retreats that they could have at sea. They might not have known what type of retreat that they wanted to plan, but they loved the idea of a cruise ship retreat. And when I was able to like kind of marry that desire with actually how they could execute it, that got a lot of likes and a lot of engagement. So that can also be helpful because, again, you are the expert. So I think of a lot of my special needs mamas who have neurodivergent children. You have a wealth of information, especially if you have traveled with your kids, that other types of parents that would love to be able to do the things that you do have no clue about. They don't even know where to start from square one or anything like that. So you having this knowledge and being able to share this knowledge is invaluable to them. So keep sharing and keep putting that information out there. These can be very much macro content because I can see some of these things being very long form written blog posts. And then you can, any bullet points that you have can be repurposed for reels or for carousel posts or quote posts on your social media. So really thinking of positioning yourself, like what content can make you the expert in family cruising, in family special needs cruising, in family river cruising, in family trips to the national parks, in family trips to Alaska, whatever it is your niche is, because the ideal too is like when you're able to cross that who the people are and the types of trips that you like to sell, then you have a really more specific niche, and it will be much easier for people to find you when you're talking in specificity like this. Then we have our engaging content, and I always felt like the engaging content for me that worked, and that also like still works for me now, is when I'm able to share a personal story that you're able to connect to, that my audience is able to connect to. And this is like the plus side of having small businesses, is that people would prefer to buy from other people. So sharing those stories really helps to create the trust and the relatability. Like, oh my gosh, that person flubbed up as hard as I flubbed up before. So one of my personal stories that always seems to resonate is the story of when, almost 4 years ago, I quit my full-time job to go into the travel industry full-time. And just sharing the story of how I did it, what I was thinking out of that time. Also sharing the story that I didn't really have a plan. So I know that I'm not the only one that has quit a job without really having a plan, and I won't be the last one that will do it. But a lot of people, that's very aspirational, and that's something that we can talk about. We can also talk about our crappy jobs that we used to have before like really going into full-time entrepreneurship. So being able to like build that relatability is hugely important, and that's the type of content that has worked for me, is especially when I'm able to be vulnerable and share parts of my story. That's why I'm very open about who I am, my background, some of the medical things that I am dealing with. And it's I just had a conversation with somebody earlier today about something that I've been thinking about, and that also helps to bond yourself a little bit with the other people when you're able to share some of these personal things that are happening as well. And then the last part of this kind of formula is entertaining, because we all love to be entertained. I feel like that's really the point of social media. So if you can create like that macro piece of content, that blog post, that YouTube video, and then kind of poke fun at something, and you can use AI to figure out how you're going to repurpose that. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. These entertaining type posts are going to be the best for getting lots of shares, because a lot of people are just going to want to be like, oh my gosh, that's me, she knows me, I need to share this with my spouse, I need to share this with my kids because this is them. This is exactly them. So it's this funny, this real, this engaging type of content that gets people really coming back. So one of the reels that I had done, this had nothing to do with the travel industry. And that sometimes the stuff where you're not talking about what you do is sometimes the ones that will go a little bit further for you than the regular educational or engagement content. So we were having a hurricane a couple years ago. I mean, that happens almost every year because I live in Florida. And there was this trending audio that I paired up with it. And the story of the reel was pretty much to say, like, I can tell the newbie Floridians from the seasoned Floridians because of how stressed out you are during hurricane season, because there is a definite difference between those that have lived here and have experienced it and not. And so that went off, like I got over 100 likes on that reel, and definitely a ton more views on that, because it was so relatable, especially in the moment. That's also part of that. The magic formula of relatability is like if it comes at that certain time. So if you take in a lot of news stories, that was actually something that was from the report that I mentioned about last year. Anything that's like newsworthy, if you're able to create, like go back and relate it to something that's happening or your industry, that even ups the ante on the shares and save that you can get from that type of content, because it's relevant to the times now. It might not be relevant, like no one cares about hurricane content right now in March, but come September, October time, we're going to be singing a different tune there. I feel like a lot of this type of content too, the entertaining content, it really helps you out when you're using some sort of trending sound or that trending audio. So it can be a song that's gaining popularity, or it can just be a sound like a snippet. Those are the ones that help it to be a little bit more entertaining for you. So I would almost go back and do an audit of some of the posts that you've had. And this is something that I'm actively doing myself, because I am repurposing content onto my social media, but I'm not showcasing a lot of that authority, that expert building on social media. I do that a lot here on this platform, on my podcast, and then I do a little bit of it through email marketing as well. I also feel like if you're just the expert and you can't be a relatable human, there's gotta be a little bit of a balance. So that's why I don't feel too bad that I don't have as much educational content on social media, because I really pack a punch here. So audit a couple of like your macro content posts, whatever that might be, blogs, YouTube videos, podcast episodes, and then audit some of your social media posts and see what you can do about balancing some of this and improving the content that you really bring to the table. Something that I feel like helps out with this, especially when you're thinking on the macro content level, are thinking about the 6 W's: who, what, when, where, why, how. And that's kind of like your most frequently asked questions if you really think about it, and creating content around those frequently asked questions that you're getting from your clients. That really helps to create that macro content too. So that's a little hack there for you. If you're kind of like stuck or stumped on content creation, that can help. And then also there's a handy dandy Google trick that if you just go to Google, let me see, I'm going to do it right now. So I'm just going to say family travel to Antarctica. I know that's really random. But if I look up there's a couple like Trafalgar comes up, Hurtigruten or HXG Adventures. So a couple of suppliers will come up for that. Then there's this section called People Also Ask. So this is, again, lots of people have been doing this. This is not my original. I do like to call out like when it's something that I came up with versus something that somebody else came up with, because I feel like it's important to give credit where credit's due. So if you go to the People Also Ask section, that can help give you some ideas for content. So I just typed in family travel to Antarctica. People have also asked, can you visit Antarctica with kids? Is Antarctica kid friendly? What is the best age to go to Antarctica? Are kids allowed to go on Quark expeditions? If you start clicking the down arrow for some of those, it will give you even more questions. So how cold is Antarctica for kids? Is it safe to fly to Antarctica? So if I, again, hit one of the down buttons for one of these, it will pop up with some more. What should tourists not do in Antarctica? How much is a plane ticket to Antarctica? Are cruises to Antarctica rough? That's a really great question. And if you know the Drake's Passage, you kind of know the answer to that one as well. So this is also helpful. Like if you are experiencing extreme brain fart, definitely go to Google. Of course, you can go to AI also. But you also don't want to be doing the exact same thing that somebody else may be doing. So really filter and like test out with what's currently working for you and what your audience, your clients are really asking for, and create content from there as well. So how do you create content without burnout? I feel like that's the $1 million question, because sometimes you may say or feel like you're just pumping out content to put content out there, which is why I want you to be more strategic when you're thinking about content creation. The biggest thing that helps me is to figure out a content calendar. So this is typically something that I do at the end of the year, especially when I'm conducting my plan your year sessions, is that I will create a calendar. And I've been doing this even when I was on the agency side, so that I wasn't coming every week with like, oh my gosh, I don't know what content I'm going to put out this week. I would create a content calendar that would have 52 topics. Bonus point, if you're in the cruise content library, I kind of have this already set up for you in the email article bundle. So just check that out so that you can get a fast pass for that. So I will start thinking of what information my audience needs to know. So there's a lot of different series that I've thought about. It's not just the content creation series, but I'm super glad that I'm sharing this with you, because it's stuff that's been in my head, very hard to articulate. So I'm kind of spilling the secrets on like my own content creation and how I've just made it easier for me so that I actually make content and have it working for me in my business. So you need to create content really based on what you also need to sell. You're not just chasing out trends here, but I do like thinking about that. I do want you to be mindful of what types of trips sell at what times of year, because if you know, Alaska cruises only sail May to September. Similarly, like Christmas market cruises is usually just a December thing. Now it's kind of becoming a November thing as well. So there's certain travel products and services that you have under your tool belt that you just can't be selling all the time. So being strategic about that as well. Maybe I know many travel advisors are wanting to put groups together. And so that's what they want to be their bread and butter of their businesses. So if you have a Riviera Maya all-inclusive trip that you're trying to sell for next year, and you haven't sold anything yet, then that should probably be that next focus. We're heading into Q2 already. We're heading into Q2. Can you believe it? So if you have not sold any of that trip, you need to start selling your booty off. That's what needs to be in your content. Your content does not have to be this mishmashed, misfocused thing. That I think is one of the other things, aside from seeing supplier content on your social media feeds, is seeing content that is like, I talked about Alaska, then I talked about Galapagos, then I talked about this, then you're talking about all the things that nobody can focus on exactly what it is you sell, which makes you seem more like an OTA than a personalized custom travel service. So that is also a benefit of following some sort of content calendar, is that you're talking about certain themes with repetition, almost with intention. So when I think of my content calendar, I always love to start off the new year with a bang. So I usually will have a couple of episodes on the podcast that will talk about like big wins that I've had. That's also a podcast episode that I end the year with, like, what did I learn? What went well? What didn't go so well? So that you can start the new year off fresh. What is it that you have to sell again? So if you do have a group trip to sell, if there's a really great promotion that's come in, your content needs to be tailored to that. So if you know that there's a really great promotion on the Olympics is coming to Los Angeles. So if you know that there's a lot of really great tour packages that are happening because of the Olympics coming to Los Angeles, or even the Eclipse cruises are a huge thing right now for 2026, I believe it is. Those are the things that you need to be talking about. And it needs to be like tips traveling to LA when it's busy, where you should be staying that's not going to be too busy. 3 things that don't involve LA that you can still do if you're visiting to the Olympics. So thinking creatively, and what helps is that you know who your ideal client is. So you already know what questions and pain points they're going to have, because this is how you create the content as well. I think like that's why I am now known as the cruise retreat person outside of the industry, because I talked about it so often. I was giving so many tips to business owners and team leaders on how you can effectively run a retreat on a cruise ship, how people are able to save money because they're able to run a retreat on a cruise ship, what kinds of spaces they can use on a cruise ship for that. So you have to look at all facets and be really creative. This is kind of, it makes me think about like media. Media can tell you that in Florida, there's a cold snap, so all the manatees are huddling together. Or they can be creative with that story. Like you can give somebody just the facts, or you can do some storytelling, infuse it. Like what are some unique angles that you can put it? Like, did you know that if you wanted to see manatees, coming to Florida during this time is probably the best time because they're going to be huddled up during winter time. So think of it like that as well. Like, how can you be creative? Because it's not just visiting LA, it's visiting LA during the Olympics. When I'm thinking about families during the Olympics, I'm thinking about safety. I'm thinking about the kids are going to need downtime, nap time, depending how old they are. They're probably going to want to do a lot of the popular things, but mom and dad are probably going to want to do some things that are away from all the crowds as well. So how do you please everybody in there? And that's by looking at things with a unique lens. That is what makes you the expert within your travel business. I also want to recognize those seasonal patterns because, again, Alaska cruises are not year-round. Similarly, Caribbean cruises are year-round, but you're going to get better ship options at certain times of year than other times of year because those ships, those nice ships, are going to be doing European cruises and Alaska cruises in the summertime. So that's also like, when it comes to seasonality, something that needs to be top of mind for you. When it comes to like content creation on my side also, and I want you to think about this for your side as well. When it comes to seasonality, especially when we're talking about blogging, you need to work in advance. So right now when we're in Q1, you could probably start creating summer content. You may be a little bit behind though. I say that because people are probably already starting to look for summer content right now. If you're creating summer content right now, Google most likely has not indexed your website yet to know that you have summer content on there if you're just making it. So that's why you also have to like work in advance. If that's going to be one of your strategies is to use blogging, you need to work like 6 months in advance. So right now we're in March, we're at the end of Q1. You really need to be looking at fall and creating fall content for your blog posts and thinking about like fall destinations. So I think of, well, I always go to cruising, obviously. So I think of like the New England cruises to see the leaves changing color and all that, and what kind of content that you can make around that. Now, and this is where you gotta think smart. you're not obviously going to be putting fall content onto your social media right now, because social media, people, is a little bit more immediate. So it's that fine line. And this is also why you want to be repurposing your content, if like for the seasonality reasons. So if you have like summer content, you're probably going to just repurpose that summer content to put on your social media, and that fall content you're going to save to repurpose that on social media when it comes closer to July and August. So again, working smarter, not harder. I also wanted to give you that tip on like blogging, because it will take some time for you to get indexed and for your article just to naturally pop up. I also want you to consider like seasonality when it comes to patterns. So for myself, I know high travel season, so like spring break, I'll probably hit a little bit of a dip when it comes to podcast stats. Summertime, I always hit a dip because everybody's traveling, as they should be. Also during like the holidays, I will hit a dip. So when I know that I'm going to hit a dip when it comes to visibility, what can I do? And that's why I created the summer selling series on the podcast last year, is to combat a little bit of that dip that I knew like a lot of people weren't going to be paying attention. So how could I still create really good content that was fun, that was engaging, and gave tactical and practical advice? And that was how I kind of combat that, by bringing guest experts, like having a guest expert series. So you may want to do the same thing if you are also noticing dips in your content at certain times of the year as well. The third part of this, where we're thinking about creating content and not being burnt out and always on the hamster wheel, is to automate and repurpose it. And AI is going to be your BFF in all of this. So my podcast will generate probably at least 10 different pieces of content. And I'm getting ready to create additional prompts for my AI to be like, okay, I need you to do this. Because I do want to be a little bit more active on social media without having to think about it too much. And the one way to be able to do that is just to use the content that I already have on hand. So how can I stretch out my podcast content even further? So I believe I've talked about this before, but how do I personally repurpose my content? So I will record my podcast episode on a free technology that's called Audiotonic. Once I download the episode to my computer, I upload it to an AI that will create a transcript from me. It is a paid AI program. I believe there's a couple programs that you can use. I don't want to say the one that I use because I bought a lifetime plan on it and I'm not a big fan of it right now. So until it gets better, I don't want to say its name. But I know something like Descript can help you out with that. Descript can also create like multiple different video content pieces if you are recording yourself as a video, not just the audio. But that's a whole other thing. So I will take the transcript from the AI and enter it into Claude. I love using Claude for anything that I have to do copywriting because it writes the content so much better, but I am prompting it to use the voice, the tone, the style, the conversational style, the casual tone that I have from the podcast episodes to recreate any of the content pieces that I need. So I'll ask it for like the show description. I'll ask it to give me title suggestions. I'll ask it to give me SEO optimized keywords. Once I've got like that basic podcast information down, I will also ask it to give me a hook for a social media reel that I want to create. I will ask it to create a LinkedIn caption based on the episode, announcing the episode. I will have it create me a LinkedIn newsletter. I will also have it create a new caption for YouTube, because you can create community posts on YouTube that is like almost like social, how we use regular social media. So I will create different prompts, and I've saved everything in a Google Doc to keep all my prompts. But that is how I repurpose like a master almost, because all the content, it may seem original to you, and technically it kind of is original. You're just experiencing, you're taking it in a different way. This is also goes to show you too that I know a lot of people, you get nervous about posting in multiple different places about the same thing. Do not be nervous about that, because we can be following people on 5 different mediums and not even see, because you know how the social media algorithm is very wonky, very not cute, where like a lot of the content that we're seeing from some of our favorite creators, we don't even see it because social media doesn't even post it to us. So don't be worried like, oh my gosh, they follow me on all the things, they're gonna see they're gonna know that I'm repurposing. It's okay. It's okay. They're not going to see everything. I don't see everything. So, and if you do see everything, I don't think it's the biggest deal either. So, and that's also why that's why I'm the biggest proponent of this macro content, is that you're able to repurpose to create all these different content pieces instead of starting from square one every single time. So the big takeaways from this section is really to create a content calendar if you don't have one that really does align with your own business goals. I wish I could give you like more tangibility on that, but I'm also a huge proponent that your content calendar needs to be your own. It cannot be like, you can't copy paste this from another travel pro, because you just have a different way of doing things, the type of content that you have different life experiences. So you really need to make this unique to you and your business. Another tangible takeaway really is to plan ahead for slower seasons, and what content can you create now that will keep top of mind for later. And then picking a really great repurposing strategy so that you can maximize the use of all your content, which leads us to what type of content really drives business growth. So I know I've talked a lot about macro, micro content, and there's a couple different types of content that will also lead to some sorts of conversion that is a little bit indirect from your content as well. So, for me, some actual like real life inspiration and tips for you, I will constantly get people messaging me or commenting somewhere how they've been listening through my podcast. They've joined one of my events, probably one of my fall events. They may have invested in something, one of my paid trainings. And now, from all of the content that I've put out there between the podcast, the events, a paid training, they are now a top performer with their travel agency. And that is like the biggest grin, the biggest smile, the biggest like, oh my gosh, I'm doing the right thing. It is very meta though, because I know I am helping you out with your business. You are helping your travel clients out with their trips. So I want you to kind of see too that like, it's not you're just throwing spaghetti at the wall. You're putting content out there. You're not going to get a lot of feedback about the content. Sometimes you will, most of the times you will not. But it's being able to see how your content is impacting people that is the true reward. How people have been able to get their families closer together. The reunion finally happened. Their teams are communicating, having the best ideas they've had all quarter long because of this retreat that you've planned together. Really thinking about your client journey and how your content guides your client closer to the goal that they are wanting to achieve. That is probably the biggest takeaway that I want you to come out of this episode with, is that you're creating content that helps bridge the gap, but also widens the gap in terms of them wanting to work with you and knowing and being comfortable in that decision. There's also some calls to action. Now, we do have to ask people for the sale, but sometimes it's not asking for the sale that can give you the best sorts of engagement. So a lot of engagement that I will get, and that's interaction, is through my weekly emails. So there's been countless times that I've asked just simple questions that I think I'm going to hear crickets on, and then my inbox gets flooded with that. If I'm doing some sort of giveaway in my email inbox, I'll even get more engagement. that these types of things help keep me top of mind. They also like get people in my world having fun, so it's not just business, business, business all the time. So these are some of the things that you can do also, is just put simple questions out there. Maybe do like a email scavenger hunt or something like that. It doesn't have to be complicated, and these are the things where you are going to get more engagement, because it's typical that you're not going to hear too much when you're asking for the sale, but you're going to hear a lot more when you're asking about questions, when you're asking people like, why haven't you traveled to Antarctica yet, or what it might be. And it's also going to give you that feedback on potentially content that you can create in the future as well. So having different types of call to actions, not just the ones that ask for sales, are really helpful for creating conversions as well. And then anything that can help create a conversation, that can help somebody feel valued as a client of yours. And I say this because I ran a focus group last year and I got so much great feedback. Like, I finally feel heard in my travel business. And that also is invaluable, because I want to not only give you the information that you need, but I also want to listen to like what's working, what's not, where are you most confused at. You are my client. Your client is going to need something different than that. So when you're thinking about your client, where they're confused, where they're like, I just can't get this to work, or I just can't figure out the currency that I need, or I just can't figure out the voltage in my cabin and all that, that is where you can help swoop in. So being able to conduct different and like have different types of content, because a focus group technically is content, because you're helping people out. You're helping get information to the right types of people. So thinking about it differently, that content can come in multiple different forms. Also thinking about content that it's not that you put this marketing piece out and this is going to happen. That's not typically what's going to happen. But when you put like a culmination, when you have like this cornucopia of amazing content, people are going to start to get hungry, and they're going to start to be thinking, okay, it's time. She sold me, he sold me, they've sold me. I've got to do this. I've been putting this off. So I know content can be overwhelming, but you also have to put yourself first when it comes to the content game. Really focus on those 3 pillars of education, engagement, and entertainment. And then also be tactically sufficient. Be tactically smart when it comes to this. Use whatever is going to make it easier for you. Using that content calendar, figuring out what your seasons of business are, automating anything, as well as using AI to help you work smarter, not harder. Please pick one of these to implement. Maybe creating a content calendar is going to be the most simplest way today, I feel like, especially if you're not using a content calendar. That's probably the biggest takeaway from this episode, is to adjust and create a content calendar, and see how easy it is to create content once you have. Because I remember I was sending emails without a content calendar as a travel advisor, and as soon as I implemented that content calendar, the weekly stress of what I was going to put out there melted away. So let me know what you thought about this episode. And I will see you here again for part 3 of our 3-part series on content creation.